Good evening, everyone. My name is Asad Lalji. On behalf of Avid Learning, welcome. Art and technology have been crossing paths since the time of Leonardo da Vinci. The first instance of integrating the visual arts with technology dates back to the 60s in New York, when a team of artists partnered with scientists and engineers from Bell Laboratories to create EAT, Experiments in Art and Technology. It was a collective to promote collaboration between art, new technology, using innovations from that era. Today, the boundaries between technology and art are becoming hazier than ever. Artificial intelligence development is bringing about a revolution that is altering how we produce, appreciate, engage with art. In September last year, a game designer, Jason Allen, sparked a controversy after submitting an image created by AI to the Colorado State Fine Art Competition and took home the first prize. Glenn Marshall, an AI artist, used OpenAI Clip to create The Crow, an AI-made short film. It went on to win the jury award at last year's Cannes Short Film Festival. I spent my last week at the International Museum Expo, and I learned about how in 2016, a Paris museum made home for Bernison, the robotic art critic that quietly wandered the museum halls, donning a bowler hat, a scarf, a coat. And Bernison used artificial intelligence to record people's reactions to the art. In turn, he developed his own taste and became a critic. We have only begun to scratch the surface of generative AI's enormous potential. But with great power comes great responsibility. Lately, we have been reading about how intellectual property and copyright infringement. When the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, quits Google to speak openly about his worries about technology, it raises a lot of eyebrows around the world. However, we know AI is here to stay and is only going to get smarter, so we need to embrace it responsibly for augmenting human intelligence and not replacing it to work towards complex global challenges. To dig a little deeper and explore the possibilities, welcome to Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Tech Art, What's Next? Our experts will share their perspectives on the current state of AI-generated art, including the role of AI in the creative process, the ethics of AI in art, giving you a glimpse into the upcoming trends across the domains of visual arts, music, and literature. At Avid Learning, we strongly believe in collaboration and are proud to present this evening in partnership with the National Gallery of Modern Art, Mumbai, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, and we'd like to thank the Director of the NGMA Mumbai, Nazneen Banu, and Deputy Director Shruti Das for hosting us. It gives me great pleasure to welcome on stage our panel of experts. Please join your hands in welcoming them. Indian Sci-Fi Creator, Screenwriter, and VP of Development, BANG Mediacorp Prateek Arora. The first seat. Co-founder and CEO of Fluid AI, Abhinav Aggarwal. Co-founder and CEO, Beatoven.ai Mansoor Rahimat Khan. Founder, Makers Legal Pankhuri Upadhyay. And our moderator for the evening, Creative Director, Tao Art Gallery, Sanjana Shah. Thank you all for being here. Look forward to a fascinating session, and over to you, Sanjana. Thank you.
Thank you, Asad. Hello, everybody. I'm Sanjana Shah, the Creative Director of Tao Art Gallery. I'm very excited to be moderating tonight's discussion on something that has been a learning curve for me personally, and I would say a very necessary one in today's world. In the coming years, artificial intelligence is probably going to change our lives and likely the entire world. But people have a hard time agreeing on exactly how and why. There's a lot of skepticism and controversy around this topic because of its unknown nature. However, it is growing and fast, making it very important to have panel discussions like these to discuss and break down AI, its impact, risks, and benefits. The creative world is now actively engaging with this new technology. Artists around the globe are currently exploring AI in multiple domains, and content creators have much easier access to its abilities. The emergence of new platforms like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and ChatGPT are taking over the internet and our social media feeds. There's a side that says AI can make machines more innovative and become potential collaborators for art makers instead of interloping infiltrators. It is believed that this has the potential to bring in more engagement and motivate artists with fresh ideas to explore new directions while creating their art. However, this can also be a particularly confusing gray area, because creativity is seen to be such a fundamental product of original human expression, brought out by our subjective experience and emotion. Personally speaking, as someone who has taken on a 23-year-old gallery legacy, I find myself struggling all the time to entirely embrace this new digital reality. And even today, I remain on the fence between proven familiarity and this risky but exciting unknown. It also seems a bit odd to break away from the traditional way of consuming art. The interaction with the work, its energy with all our senses, feeling an individual and personal connection. How do we know that AI will ensure the continuation of these unique experiences? So while there is optimism and curiosity among us, and I speak for the audience because I think that today I'm part of the audience, there's also concern and a healthy questioning around AI and its future role. So while I was preparing for this panel discussion, I decided to do a bit of like jumping into this whole thing, and I asked ChatGPT to give me its take on the future obstacles for this unique genre of tech art. Interestingly, it brought up the matter of ethical considerations. In ChatGPT's own words now, I'm going to try to mimic ChatGPT as much as I can. As AI continues to develop and become more integrated into the art world, ethical considerations will be crucial. Questions regarding authorship, ownership, transparency, bias, and the potential loss of human creativity may arise. Striking a balance between human expression and the use of AI tools will be an ongoing challenge that artists, policymakers, and society as a whole will need to navigate. It's important to note that these challenges do not necessarily negate the potential of AI in art, but rather highlight the need for critical reflection and responsible use. Balancing the benefits of AI with the preservation of human talent, artistic traditions, and cultures is an ongoing discussion in the art world. The future of art and AI is likely to be characterized by a dynamic relationship where AI serves as a collaborator, expanding the creative possibilities for artists while also raising important questions about the nature and value of human creativity. I think that was quite a nuanced answer from ChatGPT, don't you all think? And exactly what we endeavor to explore today. So without further ado, let's begin the discussion with a brief introduction from my esteemed panelists, Prateek Arora, Mansoor Khan, Abhinav Aggarwal, and Pankhuri Upadhyay, all of whom come from varied backgrounds connected to art and technology with some interesting opinions on the subject to share. Pankhuri, may I please invite you to begin?
Hi, I'm Pankhuri Upadhyay, and actually I want to thank Avid for having me and also including a legal perspective to this broader discussion on AI. So I wanted to start with this slide that you guys can see. To your left, what you see is basically an image of a paragraph from a book, which is a book that's very heavily relied on by lawyers. It's the latest edition, and we use it for a lot of our research on legal aspects of copyright. So as you can see, in this age where in 2023, where we have AI so integrated in our daily lives, it still tries to kind of very cutely explain what the internet is. And the reason I want to begin with this is because we use this as part of our workshops as well to kind of explain the relationship between the law and evolving technologies. And the thing is that the law is usually a few steps behind, especially when technologies are evolving at such rapid speeds. And also rightly so, because it takes time to kind of, really understand the philosophies, the needs behind every evolving technology, and also to kind of balance the society's rights versus incentivizing innovation. With that in mind, at Makers Legal, which is a firm that I founded in late 2019, what we try to do is try to bridge this gap between law and technology and the arts. And our approach is more proactive than traditional law firms. And a part of that also includes an ongoing dialogue between different levels of industry players. So, for example, we conduct a lot of workshop sessions and dialogues such as these today. And what you guys see is, for example, part of some of the slides from these sessions. And we try to break down legal concepts and the philosophies behind them to make it more accessible for the people who these laws are meant for. Also, naturally, a big part of our approach is research, very intensive research in support of our practice. And that includes inviting people to contribute their opinions, from future law academics to clients to basically any curious and innovative minds who want to contribute to the larger discussion on how laws can be better regulated and how it can help them in their daily practices. So also, if any of you guys in the audience are interested in contributing to this conversation, or have any doubts, or just want to reach out to us for different aspects of your respective practices, please do reach out. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, Pankhuri. Thank you. Now I would request Abhinav to say a few words, please.
So, hi everyone. Just to give everyone an interesting perspective, I think we've been working in the GPT space for the last 3-4 years. So these algorithms called transformers have been around since quite some time. It's just that now they've reached a stage where regular people can just interact with it in English, and I think that's what the whole explosion has created. So it's phenomenal to see. My own journey has been a little different. I came from the financial world, so I'm actually a chartered accountant, but loved technology from day one. So I was a self-taught coder. I went to the US, and there was this hackathon happening. It's called the TechCrunch Disrupt Hackathon in New York. For the techies out there, they'll get it. I don't know whether the rest will. It was a big deal in the tech world. So kind of went there, was just down there. We took part. Was one of the winners out of there, and then realized, hey, there's more tech capability, came back, and kind of tried to scale an AI firm back then. So we used to go to customers, and they used to say, what is AI? Now they ask us, how do we deploy it? So there's been a big change. And along the journey, I got into ISB, dropped out because the business was scaling. Actually just went back last year because they did a case study that's got published in Harvard. So interesting things, really seeing the space evolve, both generative on the tech side, as well as the image side, as well as the audio side. Just talking with Mansoor on that side and seeing the great work he's doing. And I'll keep it short. So that journey kind of took us to the cover of Forbes. We've worked with a lot of global corporates, and we essentially build a generative AI. Kind of think of it like a chat GPT, but for your company. So it takes all your organization's data in, and you can kind of do cool stuff with it. So it knows everything about your organization, its processes, systems. So almost like a co-pilot for your organization. Our coolest, most creative art project would be, we worked with Warren Buffett to build an AI version of him. Actually got to meet him in New York when we worked on this. So and Warren's reaction when we actually showed him the first version of an AI version that you can ask him questions was, now I'm immortal. And the most favorite question was, most people around the world asked the AI version of Warren, what should I invest in? And he did a beautiful answer to this. He said, invest in yourself. Because that's the best investment you can get. So that's for me. Would love to hear everyone's thoughts on what AI can do and different perspectives. this is our setup in Mumbai. We like being very creative, so we try and bring creativity into tech as much as possible, although a lot of our engineering is boring, but yeah, that's how we are. So thank you. Yeah, I don't think you need to play the whole video. It's fine.
Thank you, Abhinav. Please go ahead.
You have a video. So, what you see on your screen is our product. I'll talk about it. All right. So what you just saw there is basically, it's a tool where this is something that we are launching next week. If you have a video, you can just upload it. We look at what's happening in the video and generate music for it. So the emotions are kind of detected from the video. And the idea of building this was basically, if you can go on this slide. So as we all know, text, we have GPT. Image, we have stable diffusion. But in music, it's still an uncharted territory, I would say, because it's been so challenging building in this space with 3 big companies owning 80% of the music in the world. That is your Universal, Sony, and Bono. And as a result of this, if you have to build a system like that can generate images or text, people just scrape the internet. And that's, to be honest, it's not the right way to do it. In music, because it's a very regulated industry with copyrights, we had to go the way where we had to buy our datasets. We actually had to work with real artists. And why did we even pursue this ambition, right? So when we look at the market of content creators, people who are creating videos, podcasts, games, different kinds of content, they all require music. Because music is one of those things that enhances the quality of your content. So you'll always hear music in the background of a video or a game. And there are so many of these creators who are making these kind of content, and they require music for every piece of content that they're creating. And today, if they use any popular music in their video, it gets taken down on YouTube. And there's copyright infringement, there's revenue loss. And so this was a very interesting problem that we spotted in 2021. And the idea was we are going to solve this problem. And we saw that generative AI was a technology to solve this problem. Yeah, we can go next. And I'll just talk about us, right? Who we are and why are we doing this. So a little bit about myself. I am a 7th generation classically trained musician. I come from a gharana of sitar players. Went to, how Abhinav also was at TechCrunch Disrupt. I was also at TechCrunch Disrupt. Yeah, but I was at the Battlefield 200 competition in San Francisco. But before that, I was in the US studying at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, doing my master's in music technology. Came back to India, dropped out like him again. And yeah, and then essentially, we started this company back in 2021, me and Siddharth, who's also my CTO and co-founder. And we have a couple of interesting guys. So Antonio, who's my PhD in AI music generation from Europe, and a couple of other folks who are guiding us and working with us in the early team. You can go next. And this is how we visualize this space. So this is also what we have kind of validated. It's basically, Beethoven is the core engine that makes music, but the supply for this engine comes from real artists. So that's where we have actually paid close to $100,000 till date to real artists who have made money from this product, from the supply side. And now we are also talking to labels and the big guys, the 80% guys. So how can they work with us? So that's on the supply, but on the demand, you have your content creators, agencies, production houses who are creating content to require royalty-free music. But you also have companies that are working in content that are essentially interested in taking our API and integrating it inside of their platforms. Yep, that's a little bit about ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mansoor. Could I request you to pass that? Prateek, please.
Hi, my name is Prateek. I live in Bombay. I work as a screenwriter and a producer at a studio called BANG, where we're putting together a slate of feature film and sort of streaming series projects that kind of take Indian stories for like global audiences. So the first thing we're doing is a spy thriller with like Kunal Nayyar from The Big Bang Theory. We think it's the right time to tell Indian stories, but at like global quality for global audiences. But that's my day job, and I'm using day job in like a heavily positive context. I really enjoy what I do. But I also have certain things that I've been exploring. Basically, for as long as I can remember, I've always been a big fan of science fiction. I think since I saw Jurassic Park when I was a kid, and then had nightmares for 6 months about dinosaurs in my backyard, or so it's been a genre that I've been gravitating to since as long as I can remember. It's the reason why I decided I want to write and produce and direct and make films. But when I sort of arrived in Mumbai for the first time in 2014, and I got recruited from college. I went to Symbiosis, and my first job was at MTV, which is you're right in the middle of the business. I realized that no one's even talking about some of these newer genres, and we're like very far from being able to actually do something like Westworld or like Severance or Lost or even like superhero stuff in India, because there's no concept for what that might look like in India. And there have been some attempts, especially some notable attempts in the South that I've worked, but none of them led to like the creation of, let's say, like an industry around newer genres like science fiction. To me, that was really puzzling, because we're a country obsessed with science technology, right? Like the default is like beta engineer banega, and then we put a high societal premium on science education, science and technology education all through life, but yet we have no media that helps us kind of talk about that, think about that, put it in a framing where it's accessible to, it gives us, there's no way to talk about that at a broader level. And then the other thing that I found really puzzling is that as a country in India, where life is really, really right now, especially kind of shaped by technology. I mean, everyone sort of refers to the geo moment where data became very cheap. Suddenly, like hundreds of millions of people came online. So our day-to-day existence in India is mediated via technology, and it's changing so many things very fast in every possible direction. But I don't think we're able to understand what that change is leading to or make sense of it. Internationally, and especially if you look at like post-war US, science fiction emerged in that era as a way to talk about what was going on in society, in the world. And it really became a sort of a point of conversation. And like, we've got like 2 tech CEOs here. If you go and sort of listen to a lot of the interviews of the original sort of first, second, third generation of tech CEOs in Silicon Valley, they say, I saw that one science fiction movie and it made me want to build the future. And I saw Star Wars and I wanted to make like, I wanted to go to space. So the lack of that kind of media for India at this moment in our history, to me is egregious, right? And so that's like been the problem statement of my sort of journey as a creator for a number of years. And I've tried, right? So I sort of made a pitch doc and pitched it to a studio in Bombay, did the whole sort of trying to do it the Bollywood way, got some traction, people get excited, but when it comes to actually making these things, you run up into like a lot of structural problems. One, there's a concern that this genre is not Indian enough. We don't have like a long history of Indian sci-fi. Then it's VFX intensive, it's expensive to make, it's risky. And then even if you kind of get people past those 2 hurdles, then the perception is, hey, who's going to make it? We don't know of any Indian science fiction filmmakers, do you? You want to write this show? Who are the other writers who get this genre? We don't know, do you? So I realized that you can't tackle this the original, sort of the ordinary way, which was interesting because around that time, I spent way too much time online, unfortunately, but sometimes that's a silver lining. I found that there's this, image generation using AI was sort of catching on, and I heard about this thing called Midjourney, and it sounded like, like 16-year-old me would have been like, yeah, you're kidding, that can't really exist, right? How can that exist? But when I started using it, it was great. And sort of, I quickly realized one thing, that you can now answer all of those questions of what Indian sci-fi might look like, or what does that world look like in India, and get people to sort of start seeing that vision. I don't know if that's making a lot of sense. So the excuses to not have that start melting away with, let's say, people who have to fund these projects, right? The average producer now can't say, hey, but we don't know like what this will look like. The other more important thing was that culturally, I think what it allowed me to do, and I've so now been doing this for about a year, been posting mostly on Instagram. My work sort of traveled well within the country, but also internationally. I've exhibited at India Art Fair. I've seen some traction in sort of global design magazines. I think what the other bigger, more exciting opportunity that I saw emerging was that, hey, let's build a culture of sci-fi in India. Let's kind of visualize cyborgs in the street and aliens having weddings. And like, let's answer that question of, can this genre be Indian by making it Indian, right? So I think for me, that was my way into artificial intelligence as a storyteller, trying to tell stories that at that point in time were broadly written off as impossible to make in India. And once I started seeing some traction there, I realized, okay, this is going to be very transformative to, let's say, Bollywood, which is famously slow on its feet, adapting to change sometimes, right? So I know I've just got some images there. Now, what became very interesting to me is that none of these are photographs, right? Obviously. They're not photographs, but also they cannot be real. We don't actually have aliens getting married in like somewhere in like a fort. We don't actually have cyborgs in Mumbai. We don't actually have demons taking family photos in Delhi. So the fact that you could create photoreal imagery using these tools, but also not necessarily be confined by the laws of physics or biology, or the fact that we don't have aliens on Earth, was very exciting, because instantly people could start seeing, okay, this is possible. This is now, imagine extrapolating that to cinema, imagine extrapolating that to like advertising, imagine extrapolating that to just pop culture as a whole. And I think I'm still very early in my process. I don't have a lot to talk about the things I've done, but I think I'm very excited to explore that future using this technology. The dream is to have multiple large science fiction feature films that people go and watch in theaters that are inspired by what we see around here, versus what I think is also possible, that someone in the West will see that, hey, there are hundreds of millions of people who watch content in India, let's take this and sell it back to them. I think that's also what I find very empowering about the accessibility of these technologies is that basically anyone can start using them. So we don't have to wait for mediators or gatekeepers or validation from like the US to tell these stories. Yeah, sorry, that's the long and short of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Prateek. I think you basically answered a lot of my questions to you in your introduction itself, which is, I guess, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I will come to individual questions soon, but as of now, I think we should begin with some general themes around AI. And while there is a buzz around this, I feel like a lot of people have no idea what AI is. So let's backtrack a bit and speak about the sort of like the basic idea of AI and the intent of AI. Anybody can jump in. This isn't to a particular person. Anyone that thinks that they have something to say about this, please just sort of pick up the mic and, go for it.
I mean, I just spoke a lot, so.
Yeah, I think if you looked at traditional, and I'll keep it short, but if you look at traditional computer programming, it was always very rule-based, right? Like, computer do this if this happens. And I think AI was that generation where it's almost like a child, right? You give it information, they interpret it, and they kind of output their own learnings from it. So that was the first generation of AI, right? You could just give it a bunch of information and say, figure it out, and come back to me with results. And that was called supervised AI, which is essentially, you still need to compile that list, right? These are images of a banana, these are images of an apple, now learn the difference between the two. But there is someone still labeling the two. And that was AI till about 2017, 18. And then this new generation of AI came where you said, no labeling. And because that was the biggest challenge, right? Creating a data set. So they said, no labeling. Just have an AI read text and predict the next word. And basis of that, the AI started learning these sort of patterns of how we speak, the way a sentence is structured. But what they didn't understand was when you create these algorithms beyond a certain size, they exhibit a behavior called emergent behavior, which means they almost start to feel realistic in the output that they're giving, right? Which is what a chat GPT is. It's like you ask it contextual questions and it'll understand. There's a lot of other layers which I won't cover, like reinforcement learning or feedback from humans. But at the nutshell of it, it's essentially an algorithm that can learn from just information out there and kind of make its own assumptions and start figuring out things, as opposed to the traditional way of, someone sitting and teaching it.
Can I? Also, I think, Abhinav, it will be good to explain emergent behavior, which is basically, I think, what is becoming more surprising for people who are newly introduced to AI. So, for example, hydrogen and oxygen in themselves don't, necessarily display behaviors of wetness, but when combined together, they make water, and wetness and liquidity are new properties. So that is known as emergent behavior, and that is kind of what AI is doing now. It's coming up with new properties which the parts that it's made of don't show. And also, just to give some context to what AI is, I think what is known as the AI effect is good to keep in mind, is that we have been surrounded by AI of all sorts for a while now, and it's part. Sorry, I keep dropping things. It's part of our daily lives in many ways, and I think this phenomena where the more we understand it, the more acceptable it gets in our daily lives, we stop using the word AI for it. It stops becoming artificial intelligence for us. And I think that's very important. Like, it helps me to kind of, really relate to AI, because even things like, text predictions and Netflix recommendations, they're all based on, the systems that are known as AI, but we don't look at that as AI anymore. The newer the technologies, the more alien they are, the more unrelatable they are. I think that's when the term artificial intelligence is necessarily used. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, my point would be just around, so what's interesting is all of us have been interacting with AI in some shape or form, even before this entire ChatGPT wave. Like, so in Spotify, for example, when you're listening to music, it starts understanding after some time, like what kind of music what are your tastes in music, right? So the recommendation systems, and then even before that, this field has been around since 1940s, I would say. Like, there were researchers, so here Asad mentioned about Geoffrey Hinton in 1960s. This guy was a proponent of AI since those days. And all the projects that you see today, right, are his PhD students. Jan LeCun, Yoshua Bengio, all these guys, they were head of research at Google, Facebook. They were working on very, very interesting technologies from a very long time. And so we have been interacting in the form of Google search. Google, in fact, is one of the pioneers of AI in technology. So we were just talking, so Transformers, which we spoke about, right? That was something that they had published. And all of this GPT and stuff that we see are layers on top of Transformers. All these companies were keeping it in the back end. Like, they were not exposing it to the user. So we were interacting with it. They were just helping us become more efficient, but they were not talking about it. The moment ChatGPT came in the market, they said, like, okay, we are going to create an interaction where users will feel they're talking to an AI. That was what made them so successful, and that just revolutionized the whole game. It's actually even got Google to start releasing products. I know you guys must be following it. Like, Google is also, very, very much under pressure to keep releasing products. So I would say AI is something that has been integrated as part of our lives for a very long time. We have been interacting with it, but it's just that we didn't know about it. Now we are just talking about it, and it's just going to go into a new dimension from this point onwards.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so speaking about AI's impact on artists and society and the environment at large, I guess I have a question, which is that, do these algorithms, the AI algorithms, threaten or promote creativity of artists? I mean, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges that they present to artists as they work through this process? Because it is very new, right? And you're also feeding in data, which is external. So how does this collaboration work? Anybody can, everyone doesn't need to answer, anyone can. Prateek, do you want to take the mic?
Okay. Yeah. Look, artist is a heavy word. It's kind of uncomfortable. I told you this. I don't like calling myself an artist. Feels like a little weird because it comes with all these associations and boxes you have to be ticking to be called an artist. And generally, AI art is a bit of it's a contentious word. It's a bit of a misnomer because, like, you don't call stuff you make on Photoshop art. So it comes from a perspective of AI as a tool. If you think that, then it's just the next evolution of digital art. If you don't think that, then it's a whole other thing. Look, I think it's, obviously even if I say I'm trying to be impartial, but I'm not. I'm using it and I'm sort of benefiting from it, and it's a part of my life now. So there is inherent bias, so please just account for that. I think it's like an incredible tool. I think it's like, it is, so there are many things that I've said about AI art. One, that it's taking creativity away from people. But you're not talking to a chatbot, you're talking to a human using that chatbot, right? It's ultimately a person using that tool to create something that is resonating with another human being. The machine is still the tool, like it has always been in like the history of humanity, since the invention of like the first tool, like a stone tool, right? So I don't think currently, tomorrow if AI becomes sentient and we have like a whole new type of species, maybe then. But then that's a whole new life form. I don't think we're anywhere close to that very science fiction movie scenario. Currently, I don't think it's taking creativity away. I think it's actually, it's been, let's say, 6 months of these photorealistic AI images. I think we've all seen them. I don't remember the internet being this creative in a long, long time. It can be very simple meme stuff like the Pope wearing a Balenciaga puffer jacket, but it could also be people doing a lot more interesting, artistically rich sort of work, and the kind of people now making images, making art has expanded so much. I mean, we're no strangers to the fact that in India, to call yourself an artist often has, you have to be from a certain kind of path, trajectory, background. Let's think about the kind of people that can confidently say, I'm an artist in India. It's not an inclusive world at all. And I mean, I understand the irony of sitting in the NGMA and saying that, but it's, one thing that everyone in this room can agree is that that's a fact. Art is not, it's not even considered something most people think about as a career path or a life path, much less it being accessible and widespread. So instantly, you have got hundreds of thousands of people already who would never have thought of themselves as, hey, I can also be an artist now making art. Now, good, bad, ugly, I don't think anyone can decide. Over time, that will emerge. So it's a tool that is empowering a radical new way of creativity. So in my mind, it's overall a net positive, not without, obviously there are challenges and concerns like with any new technology. There's a big moral panic when the internet was invented, but there was also a big moral panic when photography was invented, right? So that's just humans responding to change. I think we have to take it for what it is. It is in our nature to look at things changing radically faster than we can comprehend and suddenly panic. But that's always happened.
Yeah, I think, I agree with Prateek a lot that, it is here to kind of really act as a tool for creative professionals. But I also think that, there is a big chunk of jobs and creative professions that are going to undergo some change as an effect, the way that things are at least developing now. And like, let's say, for example, in a film, there is a job of a, creative director or a person who's supposed to, based on a brief from a director, come up with the vision of what that, story is supposed to look like. And usually that involves people who are trained with storyboarding and really based on a lot of years of experience and research of, consuming different kinds of art and film and literature, are able to imagine this world for a director. And I think with, the apps that we have available now, that job description is definitely going to change. It is going to be easier to, for example, imagine these worlds, exactly what colors to use for them. Because, these tools have been trained on such brilliant data that it is going to be able to, generate these tasks that took probably months in minutes. And so there is going to be a change, but I think the approach of, basically these professions that are going to be affected will have to adapt to it definitely and try, ways in which they can incorporate them, use them as a skill, value adding to their existing professions is something that, we are going to see. So, yeah, I want to try.
Okay, also speaking about AI and its impact with, the art market and business, how open do you think consumers are right now to sort of invest in AI-generated art? Or is it still like, okay, if there's a human element, then that would make sense? Or is it still like, how open do you think India is to AI and AI art in the future?
Yeah, I think it's reaching a very interesting space, right? Because now you reached a space where the quality of art has become at par, and like Asad was mentioning, like they're winning prizes and they're coming first. Like we recently launched a book called Bridging the AI Gap. It was written completely by an AI. It became one of the first to become an international bestseller. And art is now competing at level. So I think a lot of the commercial world is recognizing it. I know for a fact that a lot of hotels now that used to set up big art in their hotel rooms and lobbies are now leveraging a lot of AI generated art as well. So it's definitely moving in that direction where it's going to be a combination. Again, I feel it's a tool, right? So like the camera was invented, so someone who couldn't do a portrait suddenly used a camera and he could, and that itself had brought in a lot of creativity. Like photography has so much creativity in it. Similarly, this is like Prateek was mentioning, it's a tool. You have to bring in your creativity in it to create something. And that's what's going to be unique. So I think it's going to get commercialized very fast for sure.
Yeah, I think considering that I manage a product and directly interacting with consumers, right? I see like creators being the first layer of adoption. So generally, there is this economy called the prosumer economy. These are basically, they sit in between your consumers. So consumers would be like anyone, and your companies. So these are like consumers and producers of content. Okay, we also call it as the passion economy. And these guys are always curious, like with anything that is new that is coming out in the market. And if you see all of this mid-journey, all the AI art generators, these guys, they just keep giving prompts and they just keep trying it out, even though they might not have a specific use case right now. But as this keeps evolving, right, real use cases start emerging. Like she spoke about the creative brief, right? Like you just give a text prompt and you get something and then you have a vision for what your project is. Those kind of images, those kind of use cases are very legit use cases. And so as a result of that, this is just going to be a behavioral change in the consumer's way of interacting with tools. And that's why if you see all the tools that were there traditionally, like tools like Canva, Adobe, they have also moved in the direction of generative AI. And they are integrating all of this new technology inside of the creative process, because what it is enabling you to do is things that would require you to edit a lot, over hours and hours of work, you can just sketch it and you can get it done. That's the kind of magical interactions that have come into this space. So my belief is this is just the start of that evolution. We are in 2023, this is the start of generative AI. It's going to take into like a completely different shape, where you'll just have an idea in your mind and you'll see it on your screen. Those kind of use cases are going to emerge.
It's very scary, as I said in my introduction. Prateek, you had something to say?
Yeah. I think when you said art, I feel like from the art market perspective of it, like maybe I can speak to that a little bit. So I've actually exhibited AI art in a gallery setting. I was at India Art Fair this year, and I was like scared to go almost, because I thought I'm going to get like pulled into a corner and beaten up by like all the other artists, like why is this guy here? And there was a little bit of that, but people were broadly receptive. There was a lot of curiosity about what is this thing that looks like a photograph but is not a photograph. So, just that visual delight, but things are moving fast. I think when I was thinking about what, and this candidly wasn't me, it was the gallerist I was working with, Devika Daulat Singh, who works at Photo Inc. in Delhi. They're a very renowned photography gallery. Her point was, and which is why I even decided to do this, is that look, you're at this very small transient moment in the evolution of a new technology when it's not perfect. So what's interesting about it are its imperfections. So the perspective of that perspective is what sort of I selected the work I would exhibit there. There were about 20 images. The collection was called Kayfabe, which comes from WWE, which is about pretending something is real when it isn't. Like how we all believe wrestling is real and reality television is real, but it's not actually real and we know it, but we like to believe it because it's entertaining. That's where we are with AI images. We know that none of this is real, but we like to believe it. It's fun. So from the art market perspective, what I found fascinating was that a lot of people gravitated to the fact that, hey, look, this is a new technology in its infancy, and we should maybe acquire some of that as some kind of record, historical precedent. And so, you know, there was a lot of enthusiastic response. A lot of people bought, so we did edition prints of like five prints each. There was a decent amount of uptake, and in India, but also internationally, because people wanted to get a slice of that moment. Going forward, I think I agree with both of them. It's when you think of the commodity or commercial art market or the creative services market, I feel like is going to get subsumed into like graphic design teams and agencies and studios. They're just going to become a lot more productive, because there will be a structural reset, but I don't think it's going to be a replacement, because what happens when a tool becomes easier is that the baseline of what is considered high quality goes up. So it's like when YouTube and digital cameras were coming out, people said that, is this the end of movie making, right? Are we only going to be watching vlogs all day? No, Hollywood's thriving, but so is YouTube. The baseline of what is considered good content just went up. And that's happening with images right now. So, and that applies to brands. So if brands can create amazing, okay, let me put it this way. If a $100 million budget movie can now be made for $1 million, the people with $100 million are also going to be making something. What are they going to be making? And that's going to push the envelope. So I think it's going to be net, strong, positive push forward for visual culture as a whole. And generally, when something's made more accessible, it doesn't go away. It becomes more a part of culture. Like when visual art became more accessible or photography became more accessible, photography didn't die. It became the center point of society. Instagram was born. You know what I mean? So now, similarly, visual art isn't dying. It's becoming a core thing of society. I think it's a great thing, honestly.
Thank you, Prateek. So coming to, I think something that is very pertinent, which I emphasized upon in my introduction as well, which is ethics and AI. I think that a big question is that, you know, there is a human input, which is the algorithm, and like sort of like even data in a way, right? How do you account for human fallacy? How do you account for like, you know, this idea where if the human putting that in, you see, when you, for example, if you tell a human to do something, the human will have its entire environment, social understanding of the way things are, and will act accordingly. But if you give an AI a single-minded objective, it could really just be a bit devastating, right? Because it's going towards that objective without any other consideration. So it's the human who's putting in that input who has to be accurate with the input. Otherwise, we could be, you know, it could be very, very threatening. So any idea around this or any thoughts around this?
So in what context? You mean in just terms of like security and like?
It could be any context, honestly. This is more like general about AI, but even with art, right? The input that's being put in, how often can you account for the end result of that input being accurate in terms of what you're trying to achieve versus what the AI will think you're trying to achieve?
Okay, so it's right now, these tools are imperfect. I think we are in like you said, we're just about starting. So, okay, what's my broad process? I don't exactly necessarily know what it's thinking, right? Even Midjourney that made Midjourney doesn't know. There's a lot of emergent behavior. So generally, how I've seen a pattern emerging is that people try to understand the language of this thing. So let's say I open Midjourney, which is a very popular image making app using AI, and I write a cat. And then I know what Midjourney thinks a cat looks like. Then I write a cat eating an ice cream. Then I know what Midjourney thinks of what a cat eating an ice cream looks like. And then you can make it more and more complex till you start building an understanding of, hey, this is what I'm going to get for very specific keywords. Over a period of time, that becomes your own kind of way to use that tool. And once you build enough of your own vocabulary of how Midjourney responds, then you can get to a level of precision for output. But two things, by design, the outputs they don't want to even accidentally generate the same image twice for copyright concerns. So there is an element of randomness added at the last stage. And B, it's still very early. So like, for example, if I give it man on stage in NGMA doing the Macarena, it's probably not going to get it because it's a more complex thing it doesn't understand yet. So, but as it gets more and more precise, and just in the last 6 months, the leap forward has been kind of breathtaking, it's going to get to that level where when you start plugging in more data sources and the algorithms get sharper, you will be able to get 100 level precision in prompts. That said, all the other previous generation of tools like Photoshop, Canva, like you said, have all incorporated these tools. So like, not only are you able to generate new kinds of images very precisely, the editing workflow for images is changing completely. Where once you even upload your own photograph, the AI can then understand and parse that and know what's going on in it, and you can use text prompts of more fine controls to edit it, right? So I think it's really about human intent. My concern with this, and I think we probably address that, is that there are people who will use it for good, but obviously there are also people who will use it for very bad, right? I think the big conversation to have is that how do you stop a flood of deep fakes threatening national security or causing a stock market crash, right? 3 days ago, there was a fake image of a bombing at the Pentagon, and the NASDAQ crashed. And then it turned out it was like an AI-generated image. But that's a scary scenario. And as someone who uses that tool, I know that one has to be very aware and responsible for that. So I think it's really about how do you now deal with the fact that such high-quality, exact fake images can be generated at massive scale so quickly and basically for free, and how to disincentivize that, how to control it, because you're very right. I think, unfortunately, evil people exist, and tools are as good or as bad as the people using them. These tools make being evil a lot easier in some ways till the rest of society catches up. So we have to figure out, the main conversation I think to have right now is that. How do you kind of stop bad actors using this for like nefarious means? Does that answer your question?
No, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I think just 2 small points. I think the environment of a lot of these algorithms is the data set that's fed to them. So they kind of get somewhere restricted with the data that you're feeding it. So Midjourney will generate images based on the data set that it was used to train, right? It'll add its own creative spin to it, yes, but kind of restricted a bit there. And I think for the deepfakes part, I feel deepfakes have been around since Photoshop was invented, right? It's just that, yes, the scale is going up. It's becoming easier and faster because now a non-Photoshop person can generate a fake. But like an image of Barack Obama doing something funny could be generated in Photoshop also. It's not new. And it kind of died very fast, right? No one sits around in Photoshop making these funny images, uploading on the internet, people going, oh my God, I thought it was real. So it's kind of this, I feel personally, it's just this moment is going to last for like 6 months. And then people are going to get normalized to it. At every image that they see, they're not just going to believe it, like they did when Photoshop first came.
Yeah, so I think you touched upon ethics, right? Like, so ethics is one part of it is, of course, like what kind of input you give and what kind of output you generate. But I think there's a bigger question that needs to be discussed is the data that this is all trained on, what is the ethical side of that? Like, for example, ChatGPT, it will just approximate the entire internet and it will give you an output. Earlier, when you would go on Google search, you would type it, you would open that website, and the person who was contributing the data on that website would make some revenue from ad revenue, by at least selling those ads on those pages. Now that revenue is just going away, right? And honestly, that is a bigger ethical question that needs to be spoken about. I mean, recently OpenAI is going and talking about ethical side of AI, but fundamentally they have themselves scraped the internet and built this kind of a model. And they are just taking everyone's copyright, right? And not compensating the rights owners. That ethical question needs to be answered first. Same goes for image generators as well, right? Like, that's the reason which I was just talking in the beginning. In music, unfortunately, you can't do that. Because you have the Sonys and Universals with the big law firm, which are just going to come after you if you try to do that. So we probably need organizations like that in the text and image space that can moderate. So there was a big lawsuit that happened between Stability and Getty Images. So I don't know if you guys know about it. It's like, yeah, it's so basically what they're claiming is like the Midjourney is kind of trained on Getty Images dataset. Yeah, so Midjourney is a layer on top of Stability basically. And so interestingly, I believe that that's the first level of ethical concerns that need to be addressed, even before we start talking about what kind of text input do we give. Because any technology ultimately is going to have its good and bad side. Social media was also that, right? Like it has a good side, it has a bad side. But it's about how you use those tools. But fundamentally, I feel like that topic needs to be discussed to begin with.
Just to add to what Abhinav was saying about how maybe I think to treat it as being harmless, that, images can be very easily modified and, nobody really sits around with it. But I think the environment in our country, especially now, with the current political climate, it's slightly more sensitive because people are believing fake images. It does lead to, a change in opinion, and it does lead to very extreme reactions based on those fake images. And so I think ethics has to be the starting point of any of these developments. And now I think I can't help but talk about laws a bit, because I think the way to regulate, all of these concerns does come down to, what are the laws that we're forming around this. And so, since these guys have been talking about data sets, it is true that, there are so many concerns with the data sets. Firstly, there are data privacy issues in terms of, we're not sure if consents were taken to even compile these data sets and then feed them into the AI generative models. And there have been lawsuits around this where, especially there was this company, Clearview, which is a facial recognition company, and what it did was use data sets which were trained, basically scraped social media images of individuals without their consent and sold it to surveillance agencies. And now it's banned in the US. So the training side of it is really, it's also difficult to pinpoint what exactly has gone wrong because there's no transparency with any of these models. And I think Edward Snowden recently made a joke about how it's funny that they call themselves OpenAI because they've been so closed about how they gather their data or how they process it. And delving deeper into the issues around data sets, copyright infringement, IP infringement, the Getty Images lawsuit, and also a bunch of artists, which is before the UK High Court, and a bunch of artists in the US similarly have filed a case against Stability, I think Midjourney and DeviantArt as well, claiming that they have been trained on works of millions of artists, which are copyrighted works, and especially when these tools allow prompts like "give me an image in the style of," that's becoming very problematic for artists. I think there's so much to kind of really step back and think about how we want these technologies to be part of us. And while the whole basis of copyright has been to incentivize artists, and also the sort of broad ethics that are being released, for example, by Niti Aayog in India has released some guidelines on about how AI tools should be developing themselves. So they include guidelines about non-discrimination, equality, fairness, security. All of these things have to be kept in mind while you develop AI. Copyright infringement kind of shows how very directly a set of the community that these tools are claiming to help get impacted negatively as well. Because as an artist, if I realize that somebody has gone there and developed an AI model of my work and can generate multiple images very closely resembling my work, I'm not associated with it, no consent was taken from me, forget even whether it was infringement or not, it is problematic. It's not really being very inclusive. And we can come back to some of these legal issues more deeply.
Yeah, I think it's time to jump into more personal questions, to do with each person's work, because I think all of you are very enthusiastic and excited and spilled over. So I would like to start with Prateek, actually. I want to understand more about, it's like a twofold question, right? So how ready do you think India is for the genres you explore, right? There's horror, there's sci-fi. I would assume it's a bit darker than I guess what the audience here is used to. And also, what inspires the prompts that you put in, right? Like, what is your personal inspiration as an artist?
Right.
I mean, what really resonates with you? That's something I'm interested in hearing.
So I'll probably start with horror, which is probably the least, in the Indian sort of media diet, is the least accepted, palatable kind of thing. And candidly, I wasn't a horror fan till very recently. Funnily enough, during the COVID lockdown, I started watching a lot of horror movies with my girlfriend, now wife, but then it was like, and I found it strangely calming, right? Yeah, I mean, it's one of those COVID wedding situations. I found watching horror movies strangely calming, and I was like, why is that? I've never been a fan. I should be freaked out. And then I realized that why the role for me at least, my perspective is that the role that kind of really scary, disturbing movie plays is it creates this like safe little bubble for you to experience really unpleasant, difficult emotions and themes that are almost too scary to deal with in the real world. But through that little bubble simulation, you were able to do it. And maybe if, in aggregate, that's healthy. Especially in India, where so much is left unsaid in like relationships, in society, in politics, in culture, everywhere, there's so much unsaid because it's taboo or it's et cetera, et cetera. But horror gives you this subversive way to talk about difficult things. And I think the best horror movies recently or classically have always been the ones that pick up really difficult topics and then make you have like this thrilling time at the movies with them, right? So like, I'm like, Get Out is famous as a newer, more pop culture phenomenon horror, sort of light horror movie that talks about racism in a very, very confrontational way, but people going into it also enjoyed themselves. But it was so impactful that it started this big conversation and made the director like a superstar, and it's all of that, right? I think so the Indian context, I feel like with the advent of streaming and sort of a, let's say, audience that's now seen a lot of global content online, we're ready for it, right? I think we're ready for it, where everyone's trying to figure it out. We don't know just yet, but I would recommend starting like, Tumbad is a film I don't know if people have seen, but I think it's a great example of what good horror can do for the Indian context, because it talks about these really big parts of like Indian life, history, culture, tradition in a way that's very interesting, but it's also scary, so it really makes you experience some of those emotions that you don't really experience otherwise. With science fiction, I think I already kind of explained why I think it's the right time. We're a country obsessed with making people engineers. We're a country obsessed with life via technology. Everyone's dealing with delivery apps and all of that without really thinking about what that means. What is the gig economy? What does it look like to be a delivery rider for like a big sort of app? Those conversations are hard to have when they're like serious and in a news setup, right? Through fiction, we can have some of those conversations. I think that's what I'm excited about. For me personally, I grew up in East Delhi, which wasn't at that point in the 90s, wasn't really considered Delhi. There was a little bit of a snobbish, I don't know what the Mumbai equivalent is, right? It's like, I would say I'm in East Delhi, but they'll be like, no, that's not Delhi. You're across the Yamuna. You know what I mean? It's like this thing, and there wasn't a lot to do. And there were like lots of vicious bullies around, right? So I really found my little safe space in media and comics and cartoons and like that story. And then when I was in college, I used to do a lot of street photography. So for me, when I started using AI, it was just, I gravitated in my prompts to giving it context that was very personal and that I loved, which was like a combination of street photography and like science fiction. And I think the first few sets that I did were really at the synthesis of that. And that led to almost this style being created of, cyborgs in Mumbai streets and like, aliens here and this. And I think that was really my very personal kind of way into it, because I didn't want to make something derivative or like Star Wars in India or whatever. Right? The idea was, what do these genres look like in India, and what kind of conversations can that start, right? So I posted something yesterday called Rocket Gunj, which is really inspired by the not glamorous at all suburb of Patparganj, where I grew up, where there was, again, nothing to do. So Rocket Gunj is about, it's about a town full of people that build rockets, but don't really get to go to space. So can you use fun, quirky science fiction to talk about how technology and economy sort of growth happens very unequally in India, right? I think the potency of genre fiction, which is broadly sci-fi, fantasy, horror, etc., is to talk about these things in very entertaining ways. And for me, that's important. You first have to entertain, and then maybe people will pay attention to what you're trying to say. And that's where I think I'm at right now.
Thank you. I love Tumbad, by the way. I think it's one of my favorite films. My mom is frowning in the front row here about horror movies. But thank you. That was very insightful. Coming to you, Abhinav, I personally have been very fascinated with the book that you've come up with. You've come up with. AI has come up with. Tell us a bit more about the process of, it's the first book written by AI, bridging the AI gap. Tell me more about what went behind the whole idea, and also literature being such a untouched by AI topic. What is it that sort of inspired doing something like this? Because it's quite threatening, and I love writing personally, so I'm feeling quite threatened.
Absolutely. Thank you for that prompt, Sanjana. But I think, I think the whole concept behind the book was, when we were working, and we launched the book actually 2 weeks before ChatGPT launched. So now it's become very mainstream. But when we were working on these algorithms, and we realized, wow, the quality now is phenomenal. Like, I couldn't write as good a book as probably it's written. My wife's more creative and literary than me. So I think I felt that, with this new process, it allows a lot of folks to essentially give it certain amount of their thought, and then allow the art or the AI to create for them, and give them that level playing field essentially. So it is going to raise the bar for sure, and it was a fun process. So I think it's interesting where it's going. To Pankhuri's point, she brought up the whole ethical legal issue behind, okay, what is it trained on? Is it just, it's learning from someone? But, if you think about it in a different way, when you ask a web designer to design a website, the first thing they ask you is, can you give me 3 websites you like? Then he'll make a thing called a mood board, which is essentially his data set of, similar websites that he likes from other websites, which is the base of your design. And then he'll make almost like a mashup of that creative process, right? So humans have been doing it forever. You ask any creative person, like I'm sure J.K. Rowling has read thousands of books before she wrote Harry Potter. Maybe Chronicles of Narnia was one of them. It's essentially humans have been doing it forever. So, it is a very gray area now as well, because now you can do it at scale, right? So that's the factor that's changed. For me to replicate someone's work at scale was hard. People were still doing it, but yeah, now machines are doing it. And I think it was just a nice way of, putting the word out there. With Bridging the AI Gap, we actually asked the AI questions around how do you deploy AI in the real world? And that's why it's called Bridging the AI Gap, so that you can generate true value from it as an organization. And, we put in a lot of our thoughts in, but we were pleasantly surprised with the kind of, feedback and thoughts it gave. And using that, we kind of filtered down and said, okay, what we found in our experiences works, what doesn't work, and kind of kept prompting it forward. And it was a lovely experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abhinav. Mansoor, coming to you, I think tell us a bit more about Beatoven. And also, you're primarily trying to resolve the issue with copyright that people face, right? So you're giving them music licenses, even though it's created by AI. So just actually walk the audience through the process of Beatoven and the intent behind it.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I'll talk about the problem first. So let's say you're a YouTube content creator. You start creating your video, you go on Adobe, you put like images, you put like everything that you want to create, and you create a nice video. Now you're required to put some music in the background. So what would you do? You would go on Google and you would say, like, this is my favorite song. I want to put this song at the back of my video. Now you put that song, you upload it to YouTube, and after some time you realize that there's something called as copyright claim that'll come on your video. And why that happens is because that music is owned by somebody else, and they are trying to claim the revenues from your ads that you're going to make, revenues from the ads that people see on your videos. So then what the user will do, like, okay, so I'm not supposed to do this. I can't use popular music. So they go on Google and they type royalty-free music, okay? And then they will start, there'll be like a bunch of websites that will come to them. They open one website. They listen to some tracks, like it's not sounding nice. Let me go to the next website. So this is like the typical behavior, user behavior. And the problem is search. They're looking for something, right? Like they have something in their mind that they want to put in the background of their video, and they're looking for it on multiple websites. So we identified this problem. We said that, okay, we are going to solve the search problem in music. So what ChatGPT does in text, we want to solve that in music. So if you have a video, you have any content, and you require some music for it, you could come to our system and you could prompt it. So we thought, okay, what's the way how a user would prompt a music system? Is it text to music? I mean, if I put mountain music, what does that even mean, right? Like it could mean so many things. So we kind of thought about this interface where let's narrow down the user into a certain sound zone, which is essentially genres. So we have all listened to different kinds of music in our lifetime. Some people like metal, some people like Indian classical, some people like pop. So can they, like narrow down into that genre? And then there are moods that you can pick from. Like I like happy music, sad music, inspirational music, and everything that fits inside of that zone. So you slowly narrow down the user into that zone, and then the AI generates a piece of music for you, which potentially you might like or you might not like. And there is a feedback-driven system where you can keep giving feedback to the system, and eventually it will like understand your preferences better. So that's basically the idea and the philosophy of building this company. So the use case is pretty straightforward. It's for royalty-free music. It's the same market, but we are solving the search problem. Yeah. And I'll just add one important point on Beatoven. So we were actually one of the pioneering companies that tried to build AI the right way. So we started in Feb 2021, much before people were talking about Gen AI. Like, we didn't even know there's something called Gen AI. Like, we just basically said, okay, this is a technology that you can take to solve this problem, right? We were a problem-first company, not a solution looking for a problem. And when we started using this technology and we started deploying it, we said, okay, like, if we want to build a system that can generate music, we need a lot of data. Where are we going to get it from, right? So what we saw is, in music, because it's so regulated, it's not possible to take data from the internet. There's going to be $1 million lawsuit on our startup and we're going to shut down. Rather, let's do it the right way. So we raised venture capital and we kept a budget aside for artists who want to work with us. So musicians would apply to our website for an opportunity to work with Beatoven, and they would get compensated for the data that they would submit to the website. So every data that we have trained and built our models on is actual paid data sets, which musicians have made. And the path forward, how we see is, we want to build a new revenue mechanism in the music industry. So imagine, like, once our subscriptions scale, all the revenues that the website is collecting, based on how the data is being utilized, a percentage of that goes back to the artists. So that's the vision for the company.
I was actually just going to say that before you jumped in. I was like, you have to speak about that angle of it, because I think that is very fascinating. And that is what, now jumping to legal, because that is the biggest issue. So, okay, just give me a broad landscape right now on where India is at with the legal situation with copyright and AI. And do we even have anything that we can say, is legislation in this industry or this area?
India currently does not have a blanket AI legislation. There's no one law that directly governs AI. And I think a few people from the government have also indicated that there is no intention to. But the Indian government has set up, for example, an information center called India AI, which is where they sort of, it's a bit of a think tank, but more of a resource center. And Niti Aayog, like I was mentioning, which is sort of the central think tank of the government, has, between 2018 and 21, released a bunch of papers where they have tried to really elaborate on the tagline which India, I think, has for AI development, which is responsible AI for all. And like I said, those guidelines are about incorporating ethics of non-discrimination, equality, safety, security, and etc. For people who are building AI. But there are a lot of existing laws also that would apply to, the use of AI. For example, there's an incoming data protection bill which is supposed to sort of answer a lot of these issues, especially related to data processing, data gathering, and storage, etc. It's tabled before the parliament. There's also been a sector-specific approach. So, for example, RBI has asked all of the financial institutions to disclose exactly which AI processes are being used in their businesses, and I think they're trying to also form an opinion on how in the future they plan to regulate it. But just to also give a sense of the global landscape, I think EU is one of the first regions that has come up with a pretty solid AI bill. And what they've done is very interesting, and I think that's probably going to be a global standard, which is that they've categorized AI application in terms of the risk that they pose to human safety and public service. So, which I think, in my personal opinion, is a good approach. So, high-risk apps will have higher obligations and more restrictions as compared to lower-risk apps. And yeah, I think there's a lot of data available online if you guys are interested in reading about it also. I mean, there are UN guidelines, but when it comes to India, I think the approach is going to be adapting existing laws to the use of AI. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. How are we doing with time, by the way? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so guys, I think that a very important question is, because everything is changing so rapidly, what are the skills that we need in the future to survive in a world with AI? What are the few things that you feel as enthusiasts of AI that humans can sort of bring to the forefront, and that's important and relevant for us to hone? Anyone can jump in. Basically, we shouldn't become overtly complacent or machine dependent. And it's very important for us to sort of like figure out where are the areas that would, you know, sort of be our strength.
It's just the interfaces are changing and how the machines, we interact with them is changing. But it's still a human-machine relationship, right? It's still a person using a tool. The number one skill I think everyone should get great at is the English language, because like I know that it's a very loaded thing to say, not because I think English is infinitely a superior language, but currently and for the foreseeable future, a lot of the algorithms and programs, pardon my if I'm getting the terms wrong, are trained to understand English best. You can prompt ChatGPT in Hindi. For example, I asked it, "Kya Gangadhari Shaktiman hai?" And he said no. So it kept up the ruse. But English is, and this is not just me saying it, it's one of the, Andre Karpath, what's his name? Andre Karpath, he's like one of the pioneers of like, he built Tesla AI, he's a PhD from Stanford, he's built some of the most seminal AI teams in the world. He said English is the new programming language, right? Because a lot of this is moving to a prompting world, which means expressing yourself very clearly in English is suddenly like useful for me. So that was my kind of unfair advantage, because being a screenwriter, you have to express yourself precisely but visually. So when that became the language of image generation, suddenly I could do it well, right? So I think that's one. But
yeah, I think just 2 points. Focus on your individuality and don't be mediocre. Like these are the 2 main things, because any sort of thing which is mediocre is going to be replaced by AI. So the barriers to actually becoming creative are going to go higher now. So you can't be an artist that is mimicking something and just trying to create a copy, because the AI is already going to do that. But you have to be an original artist. So if you see, right, like, for example, let's talk it from a music standpoint. Pink Floyd has a certain sound, or Beatles had a certain sound. Why is that the case? Why do they not sound the same? Because they put their individual journeys into that music. That is not going anywhere. That is always going to be relevant, because you focus on your individuality, you focus on your originality as an artist, and you essentially are, that is reflecting in your art. Whereas AI is generic, it's trained on all the data that's out there. So that is going to find value. So if you are original, you are creative, and you are not mediocre, and you are focusing on your biggest individuality strength, I think you will still be relevant in the age of AI.
Yeah, I think there is, to some extent, what I've noticed though, that even though these programs can take English, there is a style that you need to learn that makes your outputs far more effective, which is not natural to people, right? So if I pick up a person and a good artist, a human artist, and I say, make a photo of happiness, they'd actually do a really good job, right? Whatever they take, they could take a different spin. They could put a mother playing with their child and being very happy. But if you go to Mid-Journey and say, do happiness, it's going to do a pretty average job. Versus you tell Mid-Journey, put a mother, put a child, them playing, and then make both of them smiling, it'll do a far superior job. So I feel there is, even, and when you come to English, like ChatGPT prompts as well, there are these tricks and approaches to, because the data sets are that way, that they've been trained on, that if you learn those, it's almost like an art itself. Right? You learn the art of prompting. It is still not natural. It's getting there. They're trying to make it more and more natural every day. But as far as now I know, that knowledge is a little helpful.
No, so I think that communication is definitely going to be the most critical skill that someone could have. because saying a speech by a robot and then saying speech as a human and sort of filling your vulnerability and your connection with the audience is critical. Yes. Would you like to add to this and then we jump to questions to the audience?
Yeah, I do. So in terms of, I think your question was how do we not become complacent and
Yes.
I mean what our approach can be. I think, in answering this, we're also kind of assuming that the AI tools that are being developed are of the optimum quality. I think what we're seeing right now, very early stages of what is actually possible. And in my personal opinion, this is not a legal opinion, I feel the data sets are not that great at the moment. It's very Reddit and YouTube comment level data sets that are being used. And so, I think we have to, I would recommend really, understanding the depths of how these AI tools work. And obviously, I don't think, human creativity is going to go anywhere. But just to close with some legal best practices, I think if you're a user of AI tools, very important to read the terms of service, the terms of use, the fine print, because, for example, if you were to take Bing terms of service as an example, they very categorically disclaim that any of their data will be infringement, any of their output will be infringement free. They don't even take that responsibility, and in fact it says that it may include advertising. So from a copyright infringement perspective, AI generated work in itself does not have copyright, and you have to add enough human authorship to it to be able to be protected under copyright laws globally. This is the stance that is coming out, especially from the recent guidelines that have been issued by the US Copyright Office. So be mindful that, just taking an AI generated work and forwarding it for a commercial use or using it here and there is not very safe. And also for companies, I think, that are developing AI, it's all of these ethics, like making sure that their data sets are not biased is a very important consideration, not discriminatory and safe, and also preparing for liability, future liability. If something goes wrong as a user of this product, where is the liability going to lie? Who am I supposed to sue? Because like I said, in many of the terms of service, they have kind of absolved themselves of this liability and in fact place the indemnity on the user. And it's a bit of a buyer's beware market right now. So just keep that in mind from a legal perspective.
Yeah, we tried copywriting, bridging the AI gap in the US, and the Copyright Office took the money and then responded saying no.
Okay, guys, I think we can open the floor to questions.
So I remember when Instagram first launched, somebody entered a photo competition with Instagrammed photographs, and they won. And then later on, people discovered that it was like they were helped along by Instagram, and there was this big furor. So it sounds like that's going to happen a lot now, where people are going to basically chapo art and music and say, I made it, and win stuff. How are we going to safeguard against that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough because unlike the previous paradigm, attributing that newly generated thing to the old is very difficult, right? It's the new painting. So, and if it's a data set of 1 million images, who do you attribute that image to? So I feel it's going to be almost impossible in my opinion.
So there are two schools of thought that are going on in that space. So one is, it's an inspiration tool, right? Like even I, as an artist, I play the sitar. I'm also inspired by listening to so many sitar players. Similarly, and painter is also inspired by a bunch of artists. So AI is also kind of doing that. And then the end user is just prompting that system and creating that image. So it's a debate, like now who's the owner? Is the AI the owner because it was just prompted, or is the user the owner because they are giving it those specific prompts that is generating that output? So
I think India is still waiting for the West to sort of make a decision on this.
Yeah. But whether India is taking seriously of having its own GPT, looking at the way the data sets created in the Western world, do you think that by creating the Indian GPT with Indian data sets, some of the issues can be sorted?
Quickly, huh? Sorry, we're running out of time.
Just yesterday in the Times of India, they had a big cover on India LLM, where I had given a big take on this. But India, the problem is that their data sets are not digital, right? Hindi data set is pretty poor, but if you go to the local language like Telugu, Tamil, it's like very, very small, which is why, even OpenAI and all can speak Hindi, but not really well. So I think if India solves the data set problem, there are enough people who will build GPT trained algorithms on top of models that will be able to do fluently all languages. So I think for India, just solve the data set problem. The rest, everyone else, the world will take care of automatically.
Okay, guys, sorry. I wish we had more time for questions, but thank you, all of you. No, this was great. I'm going to pass it on to Asad.
I have one point, please. Excuse me. Just one point. Will AI find the solution to the problem which he was saying? Can AI will identify, that this is human generated or AI generated?
Yeah, because currently right now Google is doing their annual presentation, so very quickly, what they're proposing, which I think some version of that will happen, is that when the first time an image is uploaded,
Mike, we're recording it.
Archived. So I think that definitely needs to happen. Right now in the creator community, there's a very strong sense of ethics. Like I disclose that this is all AI stuff, right? And no one's trying to pass it off. But there will be people who do that. So the answer to that, like Google has to that, is that the first time an image is ever uploaded and indexed for search, there should be some metadata saying that this is an AI image, and that will always be as a record. So tomorrow someone copy pastes it. Let's say, there was a photo of Donald Trump being arrested that went viral. If at the source of it, that is registered as AI generated, even 5 years later, someone can't misuse it. So I think it has to happen at that level, ma'am, of like platforms and technology companies introducing these kind of safeguards at the level of the image being generated.
Yeah. Mandatory laws are coming.
Yeah. I think we need to do that full day workshop. This was too short. I feel cheated. And you know what was so great about this panel? I mean, all the panelists gave such in-depth answers. Normally you always have a 2-minute thing and they move on. But thank you guys for an insightful conversation. Sanjana for so skillfully moderating it. And Avid, we love looking at technology and how it's evolved. Last year, if some of you all were here, we were very besotted by NFTs and the NFT space. This year, I think it's AI. And hopefully, it shall continue for a long time. I think the funniest part was, I remember during lockdown, I busted my young daughter, who's now 9, asking Siri spellings for her homework. Just yesterday morning, she asked me, Papa, can I ask ChatGPT a question? I mean, what is the future for kids with this technology? We've not even talked about that. Maybe tomorrow morning, she'll want to be on Mid-Journey. Who knows? But thank you to our partners, the NGMA. Thank you, Nazneen ji and Shruti for hosting us as always. At Avid, we have many, many interesting programs. Next month, we have 2 very cool fusion performances at the Royal Opera House. We will be back here in this very room for a talk on the 15th of June around, you have them all going on art beyond the canvas, and then we also have a workshop. So stay tuned, stalk us on social media. There's no AI there right now, or check out our website, and thank you very much for coming here in such numbers, and thanks again to the panel. Good night.